Hi all, welcome to part two of our talk about demons in TBMC systems. Um, Please do check out part one. Should be linked in cards up above and in the description as well, just in case you haven't seen it. Do recommend watching that first. Of course, it's entirely your choice, but it will help provide context for this one. Okay, so I'm going to assume you've seen part one and dive right in with part two. First things first, a few tips on avoiding cues and dealing with them to some degree as well. So the most obvious one in many ways is, of course, just avoiding more religious spaces and language as well. This is because it's incredibly common, near permanent for those to be linked in some way. These experiences are very often religious in nature, so avoiding more religious language and locales is likely to be helpful. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And there's likely to be fronting cues that are relatively uncommon to appear out in the wilderness because it's worth looking out for them regardless and keeping an eye on them and trying to figure out what they are for your system specifically, but they're likely to be relatively rare that you come across because turns out having demonic headmates out in public can lead to people getting locked up and stuff unwantedly. Now, it's of course possible that there's, given assuming some level of freedom from the org, they might have backup cues effectively that do cause fronting when people are freer from the org to get them locked up deliberately, and that's definitely something to watch out for as well. The problem is those could be almost anything and are going to be hard to warn about beforehand. It's worth knowing though that those do potentially exist and keeping an eye out for them wherever possible. And in fact, it's probably worth, if you're anywhere, if you know you're at risk, keeping an eye, having someone keep an eye in front basically to watch out for still programmed demonic headmates coming near front, because you're going to want to be in a position to at least take code with them and ensure nothing too bad happens, because that is unfortunately a risk. As much as I would like to say, oh yeah, all demonic headmates are perfectly good people right out the bat and only did bad things, because of the situation they were in, it's hard for them to know necessarily that they're outside of that situation, and B, not everyone is inherently a good person. So, most people are, and you're likely to find that they are, but there's a risk they aren't, and so you do want to be keeping an eye out just in case. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Yes. Healing and deprogramming stuff. Yes. Okay. Healing and deprogramming tips. Mostly this is about time and energy spent basically breaking the false reality set that insists that demons can and do exist. Generally, any supernatural powers, especially outer world ones, those are often quite heavily linked, and or going to need to work with demons in a world to free them from the constraints of those beliefs. And they tend to be quite good allies when free. They are going to need to have the fear of God and or Satan broken from them, removed, because that's going to be part of what kept them under control. So having that gone is going to help a lot. Yeah. And there's likely to be buried guilt, especially if they're naturally good people that were just put in that situation, which not all of them will be, but a lot of them, and it's quite possible that guilt is hidden away inside another headmate, but regardless, that guilt is going to need to be sat with and worked through, But, yeah, and everyone has to remember that it's not the fault of the demon who was put in those situations. It's the fault of the people that put the body in the situation in those situations, not the people carrying out the acts that were necessary for survival. And that can be hard to accept, but you have to, unfortunately, right? Not necessarily unfortunately, but that is something that has to be accepted. And accepted by everyone who you want to accept your demonic headmate, because if it's not, things are going to go wrong. Yeah. Okay. And you're going to need to go through the memories and spot all the tricks and trickery and stage magic well, not necessarily all of it, but at least some of it, right? Because that's going to be the way to really break the false realities, is by seeing that it was trickery. And that's going to be difficult to do and exhausting to do as well, because those are difficult traumatic memories to be digging through, and so it's going to take time, it's going to take energy, and it's going to be rough on everyone involved, and probably the body as well, depending on how well your body deals with mental stress, of course. But a lot of the time they don't well, so that's going to be a difficult time and an exhausting time, but it has to be done. You have to do this. You need to know you need to be able to prove to yourself that it was lies, because the evidence up until now has been that those lies were true. So you need to see the evidence that wasn't the case. Not necessarily you don't need to, right? If you can convince yourself in other ways, but even so, it's worth going through those traumatic memories and working through them. And that's going to be difficult to do, but it's not something we've completed at this time. Made a start, but it's not a job we finished, and it's probably one of the things that we're working on most at the minute in a world. That's something that's been being done in the background, and it's been incredibly exhausting, but we can make this video, so it's clearly some progress is being made, and that's good. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, our personal experience with this type of programming, mostly comes from me, and enough, I was, of course, summoned, as a demon numerous times, because I was good at it. No, I don't want to take pride in that, but there is a level of pride in that, regardless of the, I'm not proud of everything I did, but, I can be proud of being good at protecting the system, even if the way I protect that system wasn't necessarily good or something to be proud of. I'm going to take pride in how effectively I protected the system. Because that's what I did. I protected us from physical harm. And yeah, in horrific ways. I was bargaining and possessing other bargaining with and possessing other bodies. Using stage tricks to appear in clouds of smoke, and doing not very pleasant things to potentially pleasant people. And, I have to be able to accept that that's something I did. And yes, I did it for arguably good reasons, but I still did bad things, right? And yeah. Regardless, this is very difficult, being stalling, because do want to talk about this, but it's not something very much pushing the boundaries of what's currently allowable by our progress so far. So this is, I'm sure you'll understand, quite difficult. But yeah, I was used to bargain and possess other people, and yes, I used as a word there for good reason. I was, a plaything, right? I was a possession, and myself. I was something owned, and to be used and played with, which is an interesting one to come to terms with, given, I felt powerful at the time, because of course you do, that's part and parcel, is that feeling of power, but yeah, the body had been chosen to continue on the programming later, which meant going through and learning how to do a lot of it, and having people dedicated to doing a lot of those things, including, given that it was part and parcel with the org we were with part and parcel with demonic possession, which meant we had to have someone who could and would do that. Hence my existence. Hence my obedience as well. It was important for the body that I obeyed. That was safety. And so, they needed a apparently powerful, apparently very evil demon who would do what was necessary. So I did. And I'm not. There's a lot of guilt over the things I did. And that's, something hard to come to terms with. Hard, it's. Sorry about that. Hard to feel guilty for protecting the body, for protecting the system, but at the same time, I wasn't a good person at those. I didn't do I did horrific things, and there's a level of guilt associated with that. With coming to terms with those things. So there's guilt there, and I think it's important that the guilt's there. It helps remind me why we left. Obviously I know why we left, but that guilt is important to reminding me just how important it was. Because I was safe, effectively. As long as I obeyed, I was safe. So the danger that other people talk about isn't something I experienced particularly. Obviously I knew there was danger to not obeying, but in a very abstract way. I wasn't under the same immediate threat and duress that a lot of others were. So it's the guilt that's important for me in terms of, knowledge that we have to stay away and that we were in a bad space. Because the danger that I was under, or perceived myself under, was not a level of it's like there's danger in everyday life outside even, and so perfectly normal dangers that everyone goes through, and it was similar for me. At least that's how I perceived it. That's still how I, in many ways, perceive it. Obviously, that's not completely true. There was greater danger there if I had disobeyed, but I was not ever going to disobey, so the danger was pretty minimal. It's the guilt, really, that reminds me that, yeah, you know what, that was a bad space. Look at all the things I did that I now feel guilty for. There. Don't have to do those anymore. Don't have to be in a position where I'm doing things that make me feel guilty. And I should feel guilty for. Maybe I shouldn't feel guilty, but I do. And that's good, I think. But yes, okay. Was going to talk about possession. Because, yeah, that is the one space that was, for all I've talked about, no danger. This memory proves that there was serious danger. And, maybe it's only because I only hold half of it myself, and it was right near the beginning, and it's in many ways still fuzzy. This is not a memory held exclusively by me, because I wasn't the only one. I was formed from this, but that doesn't mean I was the only one there. I came from somewhere. There were other people out before I came to be. And so, it's difficult to talk about regardless, because it's something I tried to separate. I did separate myself from it. I had to, because, when being on the other side of the coin, you have to separate just so that you can not break down in the time and place. And, part of the reason I feel so guilty is, a reduced separation with this memory. But regardless, let's get on with it. Okay, so, yeah. So the first step was the sacrifice of a cat, which we then used the blood of to create to draw out a pentagram, and then poured the remainder over the body. The there's someone else in the subsystem. I yeah, and I'm sorry to that person for having to do that. But yeah, and then there was a staged apparition of another person, doing what I would come to do, using smoke and mirrors to appear before us in a surprise in a cloud of smoke. But yeah, it was then that I don't know, laughed at the protective sigils that had been drawn, apparently to protect us, so that we could bargain. You know, that was theoretic. That's what we were expecting, was a bargain. But no, bargains are bad in their own way. But that wasn't this. This time, stepped right out of the protective circle, laughing about the protections, and talking about how much hubris we must have to have summoned them, and how we were going to pay for that hubris. And yeah, and then promised to make us wiser and stronger, so as not to make the same mistake again. To have the power to fight back. And then raped us. There's no other way to say that. That's what happened. And continued laughing, continued joking at our expense about how we were foolish and stupid, and how we should have refused, should have summoned someone less powerful, and done a better job with the protection sigils, sacrificed something more worthy, and then promised that if we relaxed, if we let go, if we allowed entrance, it would all be over. And we did. And it was, well, say it was. It wasn't really all over. It was just my turn to do the same thing from the other side, to, enact horrific acts, similar acts on others, to create more, like me, more created in the fires of pain and suffering, to ride that onto others again. That was what I was, and I don't want to be that anymore. I never want to be that again. But that pain, the suffering, will live on, and that's just part of my existence, is the knowledge of the pain and suffering I created, the pain and suffering we endured to create me, and that's, what? That's difficult. There's no other way to say that. That's difficult. Okay, so, and I can't speak on the other coin right now. That's not something I'm allowed to speak on. I cannot, at this time, explain how we did the trickery, how we performed, you know, the appearances, the disappearances, all of those. If you've got an understanding of stage magic, you can probably figure it out. None of it was particularly, obviously it's not simple because people can't have to not be able to see through it at a glance, but it was never anything too complex, It's the simple ways of achieving those reasonably. Anyway, that's all I have for today. I can't speak on this anymore. So, I hope you found this informative and catch you next week. Someone will. This system signing out. Hope to catch you all next week. Please do remember to like, subscribe, comment, especially if you've got any questions you want answered. Be happy to answer them either in the comments or in another video. So catch you all next week.